Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first viewer Q&A. I actually had someone email me and had all different kinds of questions for Sarah based off of our Earthbound Spirits and our Nature of Evil show. And I went, I don't have answers to that because I don't know what Sarah does. I mean, I know what you do, but so anyway, I want to read a couple of these questions that came
Go
from a
ahead.
viewer, and then I want to let you answer them in your own term, and then we'll make sure that he gets those. Okay.
All right.
So we were talking about dealing with, entities that are evil, or even individuals that are even or lack remorse, right? Remember, that was kind of our category,
Right.
where evil really just doesn't have any remorse for what they
Right.
did.
Right.
And so one of the question is you had talked about beating them up, right?
Yeah.
Do you actually have the power to do that? And how do you do that? So can you kind of talk a little bit more about that for this viewer's question?
Yeah. Okay. Do I actually beat them up? That's a hilarious question, but it's a good question. It's a good question. The truth is, well, the short answer is yes. Like energetically, I can beat them up, but
Well,
the
what does that
fact
look
is,
like?
well, I could also be hurt is the thing. So it goes both ways. It's not just like, I'm invincible either.
Sure. It's an energy exchange. Absolutely.
Right. So now, I guess, what does it look like? Now, okay. So the answer would be yes, in Astral, I can beat them up. Because I don't know that works so well not in Astral. I mean, I have like shields and stuff, but
So you're going to their energetic space, basically. You're meeting your energy in some type of a closer dimension to where they are. What would that be a good way to describe it?
yeah, I mean, the Astral realm is kind of like Star Wars meets the Matrix. Like we should make a movie about that. It would be really weird, but that's kind of how it works.
So you go
Because
into astral, you meet them energetically, and
you
then
meet
what
them,
happens?
and then it's like you're receiving information as far as what is in your space, but then you can also just kind of like create whatever you can think of practically in as fast as you can think it. So I don't know, it's really hard to explain. Everybody sees things differently in Astral as well. So for example, one time when we were removing something from a place, like, okay, maybe we should start this over. Like, first of all, there's what's called light weapons too. So everybody can have different light weapons.
Okay.
And I think you discover them as you go along in Astral. You might
These
find
are
them
just
on accident.
kind of visualizations that you create to kind of help you deal
Yes.
with this at an energetic level. Is
Right.
that a good way of describing it?
That
If I
would be a good
understand
way
that?
to describe it.
Okay.
So I think if you have some sort of idea in your mind about combat or how to fight, even, you're going to have a way better chance of coming up with something in Astral to do.
Okay.
So, for example, I started off with just a sword. And then I started getting more creative with it. Well, okay, I'm going to use a lightsaber now. Oh, I'm going to use this kind of sword.
Okay.
And then I don't even use a sword anymore, hardly at all. So it kind of evolved.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, but one thing too is like, I was going to say about a case that we did where we were removing something and I was energetically blasting it with lightning. But the way Megan saw it was that I was just beating up this entity with my hands. And I was like, that's not what I did, or that's not what I intended to do. But that's what she saw. So I don't know if it's just about the intention it's like the intention
Well, I
is
would imagine
to.
so. I mean, that's the same thing that happens if you think about it in healing, where some people will imagine, visualize ways that they're healing people. Maybe they're using their hand. I like using my hands, for example, but maybe they're using some type of a tool, or, I'm going to use an axe to chop it out, or I'm going to imagine that I'm sending this there. It's visualization, right? Because the intention follows, the energy
It's
follows that intention, and the
right. It's
visualization supports
visualization,
that.
and yeah, and it's awareness. So it's almost unlimited, I would say, as to what all light weapons could look like or what they could be. It's like, what can you think of?
So let me ask you this, okay? Because
Mhm.
I want to hopefully, we want to be answering this gentleman's questions. So you go to Astral, you set this intention to have combat, right? To deal with this negative.
No, that's not how it goes either.
Okay.
Because we don't intend to go into combat unless it's necessary.
Okay. But
So
let's say that it is necessary,
if
right?
it is
So
necessary,
we're going
then
to,
yeah.
okay. But thank you for correcting me. So then you create a light weapon of some sort. And then are you channeling your energy into that? If that becomes your focal point? And then are you striking at that evil, whatever it is?
Man, there's so many like examples going through my head right now. It's crazy. Okay. So for example, lightning just comes, and I think that it's actually more of a gift, like from above.
Mm.
Meaning I'm never alone, ever alone
Right,
in
right,
Astral.
sure.
So it could just be that I'm literally connecting with this energetic weapon of
I
sorts,
see.
and I am
Okay.
able to place it in a particular place. I'm able to manipulate it to do things that I need it to
I
do. Like
see. Okay.
I've used lightning to hold portals open or closed. I've used it to hold entities before
Mhm.
and just completely obliterate them. Now, the other question about that was, can she obliterate them? And that's not exactly.
I mean, you're not destroying them in terms of they're just gone. I mean,
Well, what I will say about that is just that energy never ceases to exist. It only changes form. So even if I did obliterate them, um, it's more like an astral kick out. And that's kind of like what can happen to me as well. Whereas I can kind of get bumped out of
you're
astral.
moved in kind of maybe a different dimension then, or a different location.
Um, I've been pulled to a lower dimension, which was probably one of the worst experiences ever. Like
Mhm.
I've been seriously hurt in astral, um, to the point where it almost made me question,
Mhm.
do I really want to be doing this work?
Mhm.
Oh.
Mhm.
Um, but because I do have guides and guardians, it was like I somebody pulled me out of that situation.
Mhm.
So when I obliterate something, technically it's like I'm sending it back to wherever it was supposed to go, and or possibly just like
Mhm.
um returning it to source, which technically is probably the worst thing that could happen to something that's evil, because it will no longer be evil once it's like absorbed back into source. Does that make sense? Because
No, I
it's
think you're explaining it. I mean, you're not the one that's doing it
some
though solo. I mean, you've got spirit working with you, and I mean, so you're not intentionally sending it somewhere. You're just handling the situation, and where it goes to is kind of handled at a higher level, correct?
well, sometimes, because sometimes we get instructions too. Like, this is
Mhm.
how you have to do it,
Okay.
and this is what is going to happen to them in the end. Meaning a lot of things that were here, sometimes they came from another dimension. When I kick them out, they get kicked out to, like, back to that other dimension.
Mhm.
Now, that does not mean that they cannot come back, but there are banishment things that you can put into place that
Mhm.
can keep it from coming back. Um, but did I obliterate that thing? No.
It's
But I
very
do.
case by case,
It
right? I
is. It's
mean, it's
so case
very
by case. So when
individualistic.
it
Yeah.
comes to individuals, for example, I don't like people.
Right.
I would say, yeah, I've probably hurt a few, maybe at least the two that needed it. But what happens to them, like, that's not up to me. That's
right. And we
that's
talked about
totally
that.
different.
We talked about that in the show, Nature of Evil.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But again, that can still go both ways. So I could be hurt just like energetically I can hurt them. So the answer to the question is yes, I can beat them up. But I could also be beat up. And that's why we don't work alone. We don't. Well, there was something else. Yeah, so banishment and the void. Sometimes I have there's like I said, there's multiple dimensions. There are things that have been banished to, I guess, the void, which is like another dimension of just nothingness, and they get put there. I don't have any idea what happens to them after that. And as far as like people, again, I have forcibly crossed people. But it is my understanding that they go energetically where they belong. And I don't know what that means, but
that's only in a worst case scenario, because I know we talk about crossing is free will and personal choice. So these are scenarios that come up where these individuals are basically in a state of deserving it because of their own actions, correct?
Right.
I mean,
right.
This isn't just willy-nilly. I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody's watching this, that, you know, you need to kind of go back and watch some of the other shows for some extra context here. We're just answering some questions.
True.
that
True.
we're not forcing someone to cross over, or you're not forcing someone to cross over until they're literally violating
right. I'm not
some
just
law, some
right.
spiritual universal law. Right.
Right. It's not because I just want to exercise my power over somebody.
No, this is a spiritual service is what this
right.
is. This is,
and in fact, even if they don't want to, the truth of the matter is it's probably still benefiting them on some levels. But again, I believe that you kind of go back to your soul tribe, whatever that is. You know, you go back to your soul group, you go back to, you know, kind of where you came from. And the same is true with any other type of entity, whether that be demonic or even aliens. You know, it's kind of just like you're kicking them out of astral, or you're kicking them out. It's not necessarily even permanent.
kind of like kicking somebody you're out of your house if they broke in, right? I mean, right. It's like you're handling the situation that needs to be handled.
This is the other thing, is that when it comes to other dimensions, as far as I understand, you kind of need permission in some ways to be there. So if there's something in this dimension that's not supposed to be here, like it's not supposed to be here anyways. So the fact that I'm kicking it out is really no consequence. Like, well, it is to them, but not, you know what I mean? You're not supposed to be here anyway.
Again, violation of some particular law, right?
Right.
Because there are spiritual laws, people.
Right. And like I said, I've been kicked out of astral and pulled into a lower dimension that was really heavy.
How did that happen when you say kicked out? I mean, was just somebody energetically more stronger than you, or did...
Actually, I wasn't kicked out as much as I was pulled back in. So it was a situation where I thought it was over. I thought the case was done. I was not grounded afterwards, after the fact. And I literally got pulled back in. And then it was just like this, I was stuck there, and it was heavy. It was like a weird paralyzing feeling. And then it was also like this, like it was pulling my energy so much that I thought I was going to pass out. And it was kind of scary.
So how did you get that resolved then? Did someone come help you?
Yeah, I was yanked out of it, and I don't even know who to thank for that, other than just angels or guides.
I think I remember when this happened, and if I recall, we did some discussion about it. And of course, it was a huge learning experience for you, because I don't want people to be afraid, right? I mean, I've had a psychic attack, And it's
Hey,
like,
you got to be careful when you go into astral. That's all I gotta
sucked,
say.
but you learn so much from these experiences, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So that did teach me a hell of a lot.
Which was
But also
probably
it
the
taught
point.
me, yeah, but it taught me that you can get pulled in again, or you can, you just need to be careful. You need to be grounded. That was one of the things. So, but that also I was helped by someone uh of the
Somebody
higher.
had your back.
Yeah, thank God.
One of the other questions that the viewer had asked, and I kind of skipped over it a little bit, but what options do you have for dealing with entities who are evil and lack remorse? I think we talked a lot about options, though, in the Nature of Evil show. I mean, but
I would just say go to the bait. Like, I mean, if you're not going to be an astral, because most people won't, but so I mean, if you're just like what to do regularly, like I would just say go to the basics. Look at some of the past videos we've done on smudging or whatever. Just the basics of that, keeping your space clear. Start with smudging. Start with that first, then move on to maybe asking spirit or your guides
we
and
talked
guardian
about
angels
that
to
a lot
remove
in the psychic
spirit.
intrusion and the psychic intrusion episode, right?
Right. And having faith over fear, because most of the time these things are trying to feed off of your negative energies, and fear being number one. So as long as you can kind of be like, oh, I recognize what this is, and I don't have to be scared because I know,
right,
I got angels that got my back,
right,
and I don't worry about it. So then in that situation, you start to create this energetic space in your own aura and in your house that
right.
just isn't compatible for them. They don't want to be there. Like I said, love and unconditional love is a natural repellent. So if you're constantly into like dark stuff, and I'm super into this dark this and dark that, well, don't be surprised if what's in your space is dark and unpleasant.
Right.
But more than that, so it's just like, start with the basics of the clearing, look back to the other videos that we've talked about, asking spirit to remove spirit. Now, if you are an astraler and you know how to do this kind of stuff, I would still tread lightly and tell people to be very, very careful. You need to know how to shield. You need to know, be in good touch with your guides and your angels, and know your limits. Like, don't
get too big for your britches.
Yeah, exactly. And my guys are like, yeah, know your limits, but yeah. So know your limits.
So, and I do want to express to people, and I don't know your whole background, and you can share on some of this. I know obviously you learned a lot of it was self-taught, but you also had some training. So, I mean, same for me. People are like, well, how did you learn all of this? Spirit's my biggest teacher. Flat out. Spirit teaches me what I need to know. They're the number one go-to teacher. But I did take classes and courses and practice with other people who do the same kind of work. It's a balance. I mean,
I will say the class that I took, it's not anything that anybody couldn't do, or I mean, it was a series of meditations, and it's a series of energy clearing. There's a lot of shadow work involved, and there's a lot of learning how to shield and just learning how to get out of the body first, right? You have to master those things first. Absolutely. Then you can move on to something else.
Sure.
If you are, like, let's say a rookie astraler, you could think of a place that you've never been, astral to that place, and then write down your experience, and then look online for validating, things like, okay, here's an example. So I wanted to go to Australia, in Uluru, that big red rock, right?
Okay.
I've never been there, never seen it. And I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to validate anything, but whatever, let's just try. So I went there, and immediately I was halted by a bunch of Aborigine spirits that were like, they were like playing music at first. You could kind of hear the music as I was coming up. And then all of a sudden it stopped and it was like dead silent. And I was like, you're not supposed to be here kind of feeling. But I had my guides with me and they were like explaining the situation. They're like, hey, we're just here to look around, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, okay, no problem. And then they went back to their music. And then I got to kind of look around, and one of the major things that was validating for me was the actual shape of the whole rock, because I didn't know that it had like this protruding thing at the back, and then the colors of the rocks on the side. I was like, oh, this looks different, you know, and I was able to validate that was also the way that it actually looked. So little things like that will reinforce your abilities, and that you're seeing things that are actually there, right?
So can I interrupt you? Oh, go ahead. Keep going. Go. I had a question.
Go ahead. Interrupt. It's fine.
Because I don't want to stop your thought, but I've got a minor parapsychology background, and the person asking the question has some classes in that as well. So we would typically label that as something like remote viewing, where we're really just sitting in our house and we're just getting a visual impression of it. So, and I know you've described astral as being a deeper experience than remote.
It's highly interactive. It's interactive.
So I was going to say, can you kind of describe just a little bit how it's different? Are you still very aware of where you are here in the now, or are you more there?
I mean, there is still an awareness of, you know, my body, my physical body being at home. Yes, there is a sense of that. But the deeper in that you go, the farther away that seems. And you allow yourself to be more immersed into it's like virtual reality. If you've ever been into a virtual reality situation, like that's literally what it's like. So you're kind of aware that maybe this isn't real or seemingly 100% real, right?
So it's not just glimpses of images. It's more like you're actually in that space.
It's more like,
which makes it more of, I mean, it could be called remote viewing, but again, we don't want to get hung up in labels, but okay. That makes sense.
So remote viewing could be where I'm getting pictures of a place. Like I remember one time,
impressions.
Right. I was on the phone with my sister, and I wasn't on the phone, but I was like texting her, and I was like, oh, were you just at this place? And I'm like, I described the place, and she was like, oh my God. Like, it's just like, that's just creepy. So, but that wasn't astral. That was well before I knew.
And astral. I think that's important. I wanted to bring that up and ask that question because I wanted to delineate. There was a mini video, and I did share a link to that to help this viewer kind of get a better idea. But I did want you to just highlight again the fact that when you're in astral, it is a much deeper experience than remote viewing. Is it full out of body where you've lost touch with your body? Not really, but it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum.
Right. And I think we did briefly talk about this because I would liken the lucid dreaming being where you are aware that you're dreaming and you have control over yourself during that dream. That is essentially what astral feels like, because and that would be like almost the full on of it, because you're so immersed in that dream, in the physical reality. You can feel things. You could even smell things sometimes in dreams like that.
So you're not up walking around and engaging when you're in astral. I mean, you're down and kind of out, correct?
Right. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. It's a much more meditative situation. Now, I can do what I refer to as half and halving, which is much more like remote viewing, but it's kind of this like energetic in and out where I can pop in and pop out and pop in and pop out.
Right.
And
that comes with time and practice. So you can control where your spectrum.
Right. Your energy, because your energy is in and out, it's good for picking up or like reconnaissance type thing, where you're just kind of trying to get a feel for the situation, but you're not really ready to go fully into astral yet. And that can really be helpful as like a pre a pre-look, right?
Right. Gotcha.
And we do that typically. We do pre-looks, and we're like, okay, what are we dealing with? And then we come up with some sort of plan. Because the spirits always know when you're coming anyway, so you have to have some sort of plan.
Right.
Or,
You've
it's a
mentioned
chess
that, yeah.
game. It's very much like a chess thing where,
Sure.
everything's all out on the table.
Well, if someone's trying to trick or deceive, right, if they fall into that evil or negative category, because we distinguish between those two being a little different, they're not out to do good stuff. So you kind of have to, it's like the police force or the military.
Right.
You kind of have to outsmart your enemy a little bit. So
right.
true. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. So I don't have any more questions. Did those cover the things that you wanted to address based on those questions?
I think the only other thing I had written down was about you're never alone in Astral, and
meaning you have positive spirits with you,
right?
well,
And kind of
correct?
going back to what options does Sarah have for dealing with entities and individuals,
Mm-hmm.
right? At least the negative ones. And like I said, if you're not doing Astral, really calling upon your angels and guides, or whoever it is that you believe in. I'm Team Jesus. Use those to your advantage and really ask for help, because a lot of them, they don't help really unless you ask for it, or unless like you're in direct danger. Like, they'll intervene on some occasions, but for other things,
it is important to ask. It's true in
Yeah.
mediumship as well, right? I mean,
Right.
it's true in
the other thing I was going to say is land rituals and channeled remedies. So sometimes there isn't anything you can do. There's been multiple cases where I've had to go back multiple times, or it just seems like it's kind of like a never ending, there's always something. And sometimes that can be because of the land itself, and sometimes that cannot be fixed. But sometimes it can with particular rituals, or like I said, channeled remedies, like we talked about earlier, where we get, kind of the solution based on things, the situation that we're dealing with.
And that makes sense. I mean, even in healing work, it's like people who are doing energy transformation, I hate to use the word healing, right? But if people are doing energy shifting and you're tapped in, you're going to get guidance on what you need to do. Same thing with mediumship. Again, it's that whole awareness thing that we, did our awareness episode on. Yeah, you get guided as to what's the best course of action to take. Yeah,
absolutely. I always have a plan. So
land ritual, and then what was the one besides land ritual? And
then channeled remedies. So
meaning,
for example, like we've had some places that, like, for example, they're cursed by natives, right? There's not a lot you can do to undo that curse. And sometimes they're not willing to negotiate with us. And sometimes they are. So we've made friends, like in Astral, with just different people that could help us. Like one of them is a native elder who would help us. Like he basically gave us the instructions on the ritual, how to do it, and then how to tell the person to do it in their home, the things that we needed it, and a rough idea, right?
So that's more of that guidance coming from other beings.
It's very rough, but it was acceptable for them, right? They were like, if you at least put into this effort to do this ritual, it would be accepted.
Well, go ahead. I got a question, but keep going.
Yeah. And so we've had that a couple of times, and we've also had, when I say channeled remedies, it's just like, like you need to salt wash your mirrors, or you need to, it's a particular thing that will come up spiritually. That
makes sense. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. It's just guided. You're just guided to what to do. Well, so I think my question about that is why don't they do it? If they're there in Astral, then why don't they do it? Why do you have to come in and do it? I mean, just
Oh,
it's like,
um,
well, if they already know the answer, why haven't they already done it?
really no. Like there was one particular situation where there was I don't know what kind of entity it was. It was a weird entity and it was plaguing this area. And the other native spirits that were around there were like really plagued by it. They were like, God, we can't get rid of this thing. And they were like super happy that we were there to assist in banishing it, like just off the way.
Isn't
Like,
that funny? I mean, you would think
yeah,
it could be resolved in its own dimension and space, but
I guess.
us, we can't resolve our crap in our dimension. So I
Well, I guess the only thing that I can think of is that because we are living and we're connected to the earth's energy in a much stronger way,
Mm.
our energy does have like a much more palpable effect on them.
That's a
So
really good insight, Sarah. I hadn't even thought of it. Like if that's really, yeah,
yeah, so just like they can have, influence over us, but it's very
sure.
subtle. We too can have influence over them.
We
So
forget our own value, right? Our
we
own.
really do. We really do. I mean, to me, it seems like they should know more because they're on the other side, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I think that that's a
but it's
fallacy. Yeah, it's
right, but it
again,
is
it's
a
person
fallacy.
specific. It's spirit specific.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
spirit,
So
their spirit.
so
Yeah,
this particular tribe were very grateful, and it filled me up with so much just like love and
absolutely.
gratitude that
Sure, I can
I
see
was
that. Yeah.
so happy that we got to help them, and even the entity like still like he kind of got away with whatever because he willingly left. Like we threatened him, we were like, if you don't leave we're gonna bust your ass.
Mhm.
But he did. He walked away and he went into his little space and we
Mhm.
banished him off the property. So that's fine as long as you're not bothering anybody. You're
Now,
fine.
was this a case where a client had gotten a hold of you and asked
Yes.
for assistance, and then had after that incident, did they need to get back with you? Did the problem come back?
After that incident, no, and then he also had to go through his own like land ritual thing, like
Okay,
which my partner helped with that.
okay,
Um,
but
because
they
she
didn't
was actually
contact you
she was
again and
actually
saying there
in
were still
closer
problems.
proximity. This was like in on the East Coast.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
she was in closer proximity and she was able to kind of coach him through the actual ritual process that needed to happen. And in fact, we kind of in real time we came together. So as he was doing the ritual
Mm. I understand. Yeah.
physically,
Mhm.
we were astrally working
Sure.
with the natives and this
Yep.
entity. And honestly, he did not put up a fight. It was not a big deal, but it was just interesting.
I was just
Well,
curious if the
he did put
client
up a
had
fight
stated
because
that.
we had to do all of that to keep him away because he wouldn't stay away. And
Right.
even the other spirits that were there were like, yeah, we can't get him out of here.
Mhm.
So we did. We had to lay the law down.
I
But
just didn't know if the
once it
client
was,
had said, like, oh, he's back again, that kind of a thing, or
to my knowledge, he
the
has not come
experience is
back.
still happening. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We do have problems sometimes where they do come back.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, no.
Right.
Not that I know
Which
of,
is
anyway.
why anyone that guarantees you that they can get rid of your paranormal experiences is just full of crap.
Right.
So, I
Because
mean,
we
there's
have
just
we have
too
like,
many different variables.
obliterated things and or at least you think you obliterate it or you send it back to where it comes from. And it might take them a while, but they could come back. So it just depends on the situation and what we're
Right.
dealing with.
Right.
Uh,
Whether or not it's active or it's an actual spirit, or it could just be residual energy. Is it the living, we get into all the whatevers. So
it's so
yeah,
individual. And a lot of
it
times
is
things
case
don't
by case.
even want to, they don't want confrontation. There's a lot of times where if we actually want to catch something, we have to do like a sneak attack, which to me is like you don't have time to really think. Like you make the plan, but they don't know when you're coming because as long as you just decide to go,
Mhm.
it catches them off a little bit because
Well, and
time's
that's
not
where
really a
time and
thing.
experience, you gain that skill set. So it becomes something that the more you do it, I mean, I remember sometimes some of the conversations we had, you were still learning a lot. Not that we don't always learn, but it comes with time and
Every case,
experience.
I learned something new.
Right.
I will never stop learning. So, well, at least as long as I continue to do cases and stuff. But
Right. I get it. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Well, thank you for answering those questions. So I'll make sure
absolutely.
that this was received through an email. So I will make sure that the viewer gets a link to this video. So
Yeah,
if
I
any
hope
of the
that
rest of
that
you have
answers it.
questions, it doesn't have to be about astral or paranormal. If you have questions about psychic abilities or mediumship, awareness, spiritual topics, or you want us to answer something for you psychically, yes, that's right. We went out on a limb now and we said we're going to answer questions for you of a psychic nature. We'll give you our answers. So if you want to submit those, you can do that in the comments to the video, get a hold of us through email or through any of our many social media pages. So thanks for answering those questions. And any last comments?
No, that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.